Whether it's working with inmates, everyday people, or professional athletes, today's guest is making a real difference. Get ready to hear her story. That's coming up next.
Welcome to the Living Richly podcast. We are absolutely excited and thrilled to have you here with us. You are going to be listening to one of the most influential people, one of the people that has shaped our lives, shaped the life of what Living Richly is, the whole movement. She has had such a great impact in our lives. Dr. Sherry Cain, welcome. It's so good to have you here with us. Finally, you're here on the podcast. So how you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much, guys. It was, I was really honored that you asked me to be on, and just hearing you introduce me that way. I really, meeting you all and getting to work with you and watching this develop, and your journey has been amazing and wonderful. And so I feel like I'm so excited too. I'm just so excited. If anybody, even if Oprah Winfrey had asked me, it wouldn't have held the same excitement as watching people who I've been able to watch how hard you all have worked.
Well, there's no understatement when you say your influence on us has been profound. I've often referred to you as the lady who saved my life. Like the influence, this podcast in many ways was influenced by your work and our journey. Obviously us doing the work, but you influencing that journey. And so much of Sherry, Dr. Sherry, already shows up in so many of our conversations. So to have you live with us here on the show today, so exciting. We look forward to the conversation.
And you'll hear us probably at times do what Eric just did there. For those of you that are listening, you're going to hear us say Sherry and then catch ourselves and say Dr. Sherry.
We're just going to go with Sherry for the rest of the show.
And it's just because we are so comfortable in that relationship that we have with you that we do certainly call you Sherry. Sometimes there's other words that go along with that, especially when you've given us a real profound truth. But we'll leave those for another episode. Yeah. We do want to, and what
do you bleep those out, by the way?
No, we don't. We leave them whole. Those well-placed F-bombs just need to remain intact as is for the real, raw nature of the show.
Yeah, we certainly do that. We thought, again, we recently had on a couple of episodes, encourage our listeners to go back and listen to the episodes on Jim Harrington, another person who has really helped shape our lives.
Big time.
And as we did with Jim, we want to do the same with Sherry, and that is we want to find out a little bit more about your story, and then we're going to, in next week's episode, we'll dive into a lot of the dynamics of the kind of cognitive behavior therapy and some of the other modalities that you use to support the people that come and see you, and things that some of our listeners can apply to their lives. Sherry, you are normally on the other side of the couch asking the question of someone else to tell them to tell you their story, and often my guess is they begin with this statement. Well, I don't know where to begin. And you say, it's your story. Start wherever you want. So Sherry, it's your story. Why don't you start wherever you'd like?
Wow. I'm going to have to rethink that and maybe not ask people that from now on. Not start with asking them that, because that's a tough one. Not tough. It's a big question.
Mm.
Yeah. It's a big question. Where does your story start? When I was thinking about it with this episode, I thought, well, starting with becoming a therapist might be a decent place to start. And it's interesting because when I was in school, I was the first one in my family to go to college. And when I graduated high school, I thought I wanted to go to medical school. And so I started my bachelor's degree at Marshall University and graduated. And when I was finished, I wasn't sure I wanted to go to medical school. So I was sort of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And a friend of mine said, you should talk to this person about this counseling program. And I thought, okay, that's still in the helping profession.
Yeah.
And so I met with this guy, and it was really interesting. You know, I think the universe sometimes knows what we need and where we need to be before we do.
Oh, truth.
Because it was already past the deadline for entry into the program. But the director I met with said, well, I think we can get this to happen. So I started the program. And now at this point, I'm not able to imagine anything else that I would have been that was a better fit.
I would have to wholeheartedly agree with that statement. I mean, we've known you now for a number of years. I think of all the conversations that we have had, you're a master at your craft. And for those of you listening, Dr. Sherry's not just an acquaintance of ours. She's our coach. She's our therapist. She's helped both of us tremendously in our journey. So when you say I can't imagine doing anything else, I think both Rob and I, and probably everybody that you work with, and you work with quite a range of people. You are the sort of like the psychologist or the for the Philadelphia Eagles. So for professional athletes, you're like their mindset coach. You work with everyday people and everyday leaders like Rob and I, and you also work with inmates. I mean, you've worked with quite a range of individuals, and that must be quite an experience for you. Yeah, it really has been. When I was reflecting on 35, it's been 35 years I've been in this profession.
You started at 8 years old?
Yeah, 8 years old, exactly. But 35 years, and I've worked in probably every setting I could work. College counseling centers, Head Start, so, birth to 5 programs, pastoral counseling centers, inpatient, outpatient drug and alcohol. I've worked inpatient psychiatric. Now, with professional sports, and my youngest client has been 4, my oldest client 92 right now.
Wow.
And so, I say, like, human beings are the most interesting. We are the most interesting creatures. And it's been just an amazing honor to get to most of us in our careers don't get to experience the inside of people's lives.
I love the fact you're right, that variety of, and to start into that, maybe take us back to, you decide you're going to go into this world. Like, when did it shift? When did it shift from maybe the I don't know if you still remember your the first individual that you worked with or not, 35 years ago. Most of us usually remember. I remember the first person.
Everyone remembers their first.
Yeah, I knew you were going to go there. He's such a child, eh? He's such a child, eh, Sherry? But working in that to all of a sudden, at sometimes perhaps standing, and here's a professional athlete or a high performing business owner sitting in front of you, basically saying help. What a journey that must have been. Maybe give us a bit of insight into how it went from those initial people that you worked with to this big scale, because not every person gets to work at that level that you're working at.
Yeah, and I do remember my first client actually, and it's so funny that you guys mentioned some of the well-placed phrases that you have at times said to me, because the first client I ever had, that was their opening phrase to me. So that's why I've been able to handle it. I've heard that a lot in my career.
Well, for the sake of our listeners, because right now we're talking in code, they don't understand what we're talking about. But there's several moments where in our conversation, Sherry, mine and yours, I no doubt, and even when you've done group work with us, where the question you're asking, the framework you're presenting, the different perspective really rattles our cage. And you do it always with such a safety and comfort and compassion. But what it elicits in us is a "fuck you, Sherry."
Right.
And I think you've come to know that when you hear that from us, oh, I'm on to something here.
Right. I'm like, score. Got it. We've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
I have Sherry saved in my phone and my contact list as fuck you, Sherry. Not really.
And so my first client was a little teenage fella that was on probation. Very first client, it's my internship actually. So I'm not even made it through the internship year, and I'm so excited and hopeful, and I trot out to get him with all of my tools, and I'm like, "Hi, I'm Sherry. You want to come on back?" And he said, "Fuck you." That was my first introduction to counseling, and so I can handle it, guys. So we'll keep doing the work to elicit more of those because I can handle it.
So when we often, and we use this on Living Richly episodes all the time, is language matters. The way we the words we use are so important. We're going to get in more detail about language and all of that in the next episode. But what about for you? What was the language like when you were sitting in front of that individual and that's their first response to you, and now you're sitting and talking to them? Are you using language, or are you thinking, is your thoughts, I'm going to continue to build this, that one day I'm going to be sitting in front of quarterbacks and professional athletes and CEOs? And what was your thinking in those early days compared to where you are today?
Yeah. No, at that point, actually, during that first session, my thinking was just, oh my Lord, what have I done? What have I done?
Right. Good. She is human.
She is human. Yes, she is. Yeah.
Right. And, really the development over my career, in the early years, I would not have imagined if somebody said, "Oh, you're working with the team that's in the Super Bowl." I would have been like, how does something like that happen? How do you get there? So it wasn't anything. It wasn't like I set out to do that particular career. I knew I wanted to help people, and I had a really good first mentor. My mentor in college, now 35 years later, we still work together. I did a training with him last week. So, it speaks to the importance of what Virginia Satir calls an enlightened individual in your life. It speaks to why some kids come out of families that's the same family, but the kids have a real different experience throughout their lives. And that Virginia Satir, who's the sort of the mother of self-esteem work, says, it's because there are certain individuals that touch us and shape us. And so my experience with Ed Jacobs certainly did shape me and shape the therapist I became. And during the end of my master's degree, what was really interesting, there were, just like any place you work, there are colleagues that have issues with each other, or people get along and they don't get along. But there was a professor who had a very different theoretical orientation than my professor. And he tended to really have issue with anyone who ascribed to the other orientation. And it was one of the standout moments of my 2 years in the master's program, because he had issue with me all along because of my orientation. And it was near the end, and I was in his office because he was the only professor. We had to have classes with him. And he said, "Sherry," he said, he said, "it's no secret the struggle I've had, with your work during this program, your aligning with this other person." He said, and I've never said this to anybody before, but he said, "You were born to be a therapist."
Wow.
And it just really struck me, because this man that had, been pretty difficult for 2 years said, "You were born to be a therapist." And I've never forgotten that. And even in the beginning, early on, it didn't land in the same way it lands on me now, because my daughter, who, they're in college, they're trying to decide about their career. In that, she's asked me a lot of questions about my job and she said, Mom, do you like being a therapist? Because they're often on the other end when I get a phone call and they hear me, I'm taken away from, and she's like, what makes you want to sit and listen to people's problems all day?
Well, I've wondered at times why you would, what makes you want to listen to mine. So
it is that desire to help, Eric.
Right,
it is the desire to help. I want to help you.
Yeah, I know. And you have, tremendously. Yeah.
But it really is. I really do. And really, really can say that, like, I love going to work every day. I love going to work. And then trust me, there are some hard days. There are hard days. I hear hard stuff all day long. I also see the indomitable human spirit in people, and that, seeing that even though we might feel like it, but we are not easily broken. So as I was saying what I told her, I think this is like, I plan to be doing this when I'm 90. And that's the good thing about being a therapist. I think people even like respect you more. You know how like the president, when they're 90, we want to kick them out because they don't know what they're doing, right?
Right,
yeah. But when a therapist is 90, we just maybe see them that they're wiser and have more experience and they're more revered.
Yeah. Now, so again, and I recognize we talk often, even on the podcast, around the notion and the importance of therapy and how helpful it's been for us and how important it is. And very rarely do people get to be kind of, again, get to ask questions of a therapist. Like, what's it like? What's life like in the home of a therapist? Your kids must have just like, what's it like when they're growing up, right? Like, do you with your kids when they were 14 or 13, would you say, now, dear, language matters?
Well, okay. So first, let me just tell you that the general consensus is that no one likes living with a therapist. You've been
told that, right?
Let's just get that out of the way, shall we?
Yeah, just out of the way up front. And it's almost to the point where, now I say this facetiously, but like, it's almost like if you're sitting across at dinner, if we're all at dinner and I say, hey, can you pass me the butter? They say, stop doing therapy on me. Wait, I just want the butter. Like, yeah. It was an innocent question. I really did just mean I want the butter. It wasn't code for something deeper. Just, could you pass me the butter? Could you stop doing therapy on me? So that's sort of the baseline for where we start with what it's like living with a therapist. And then, I mean, certainly there are lots of times where I believe I've earned an A on my parenting report card because of my therapy skills, right? Like I'll walk away and think, oh, textbook, textbook. I handled that so well. And then because of my humanness, there are other days where I might get kicked out of the classroom, not only failed the class, but expelled from school for how poorly I handled something. And those are, maybe that day I was hungry or angry or lonely or tired, any of those halt things that have us not be operating at our best selves. But lots of times I have used a lot of the skills in helping my kids.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's freeing, right? Because most of us, we go through, like, we can be our harshest critic. We can be the one that is the least compassionate on ourselves and be like, oh, I screwed that up and I'm such an idiot. And,
I've heard people do that. I can't relate, but I've read about that in books. Yeah. That some people do that.
Sherry's on the call.
Oh, Sherry's on the call, right?
while she'll hold certain things in confidence.
She might call me on a bullshit.
When she rolls her eyes, I know it means you're bullshitting.
Right.
But the idea of recognizing, even a therapist has days where they don't handle something well. They don't do what we all know we want to do. We need to, we do the shoulds, right? That even a therapist might fall into the shoulds around some of the things that they do.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. We're human before we're anything. And that's what I always remind myself and my clients. We're human before we're anything. And that means we're not going to do it perfectly and we're going to make mistakes. And there have been many times, I was sitting with a client the other day and they were talking about, they said that their parent who had oftentimes wounded them, they had never heard, "I'm sorry," from their parent. The parent had never apologized to them. And, I've apologized to my kids a lot when I've made mistakes. And I think that's what you learn when you build secure attachment. You learn that secure attachments can handle when you mess up and when you make mistakes. And I had my daughter got an award for writing what it was like to live with a therapist. And she got an award for that in school when there were some parts that were not flattering. I wondered if I'd have clients after and I didn't even know she was writing the paper. So I got it after she had turned it in, and the teacher wrote, "Wow, this is really raw and real." And I'm looking at it going, "Oh crap, this is really raw and real." But I also felt happy that she had what would the word be? She felt secure enough in herself and safe enough that she could write her truth, even if at times her truth had not been flattering of something that I did poorly. So, the other thing with kids and being, the things that we teach them sometimes come back. The other day I can't even remember what I was doing, but my son was in the other room. I was asking him to help me find something. I was maybe rushing to go out the door. And here's another thing about this, the secret lives of therapists. Me and all the therapists I work with here, we have a therapist group chat and we send each other funny memes at different times. And the one that came the other day that was so spot on was like, "This is me leaving for work at 8:06 to be at work at 8." Cause that was often me rolling in. So I was running around the house looking for something and I was yelling down the hall, David, can you help mom find this? And he just yells back, "Mom, self-soothe."
Oh no.
Self-soothe. Okay.
Yeah.
You could self-soothe yourself dinner tonight.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, about self-soothing. And so
that's awesome.
It's being a therapist. I think I have a lot of tools that I can get out of those places maybe quicker than I would have before if I wasn't a therapist, because I use them all day, every day. Right. So it's not that I don't go to those places. It's okay. I use these tools all day, every day. And so it helps me manage my emotions and manage my life.
So what is one of the things that you do? So often we deal with, and I know that we all have trauma. We all have those things that we deal with. People that are in your line of work with the kind of individuals that you are helping and supporting. I think of paramedics or police officers and how many of them, there's the PTSD and the burnout because of the stuff that they see. The stuff you hear at times must be absolutely just horrific. And there's so much that goes on. Most of our listeners have gone through seasons where they deal with their own trauma. What are a couple of things that you do to kind of help reset yourself after a difficult session or even a difficult day. You do need to go home and be a mom and be part of a family and to do all those things. What are some of the things that you do in order to kind of find that sense of, I don't know if the word's peace or what it would be?
Let me use the language you use with us. What do you do to fill your cup?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I do really focus on taking care of myself. I really do, because you have to have energy to be able to care for others, and whether that's my children, my clients. So I do something every day that's nourishing for me. I think the big things that I do, I exercise every day. So I exercise every day, and that could be, you go into the gym, or it might be I go for walks a lot. I do yoga. I think yoga is I encourage all of my clients to do yoga, because I think it's one of the best all around forms of exercise and relaxation. I read to relax. I read a lot. I watch, I continue learning, and that helps me take care of myself. Like, I continue to learn and expand my mind on both things for work and, just learning how to transplant flowers in a certain way. Like, just something that's a hobby. I get outside a lot. I work with flowers. I work with things that are beautiful and give me, what's the word I'm looking for? That nourish me. I get around the water. Like, if I have to work something out, being near the water is really important to me. We have a lake here, and I do a 4-mile hike around that lake quite often. Other things that I do for me, I make time for friends and connecting. And I feel like I'm lucky. I have a good group of therapist friends. Lots of my friends are therapists. So, it's a group of nurturing people. And we meet, all the therapists, we meet here at least once a month for a dinner together. Another one of them and I meet once a week. So I build that time in, to focus on just, who is Sherry and what do I need? Not Sherry, the therapist, not Sherry, the mom, not Sherry, the partner. Like, how does my cup get filled? What nourishes me just as a person? I make sure and do fun things. I love going to the movies. I would go ride my bike, kayaking.
That's fantastic. All these things that we talk so often on the show, and this was, again, a major influence of yours on me personally, for sure. I used to wear working myself to the bone almost like a badge, taking care of others, even when I had nothing left to give, but I thought it was honorable, noble, right? And felt it was selfish of me to invest in me. And you really helped me come to understand that actually radical self-care, you're the first person to actually use those words with me. I remember that very conversation where you talked about radical self-care, and how I see it now as the least selfish thing you can do, because if we're not filling our own cup, we're showing up like half a version or a quarter, just a percentage of ourselves in our other relationships and everything else. And so it's so important to be doing that stuff. I'm curious, Sherry, I mean, you work with a lot of people. You've had a lot of difficult conversations with people. You've heard people's stories and the challenges that they've overcome. You talk about how your tools, the tools of your trade, have helped you in parenting. What are some of the things that, without getting into any more detail you're comfortable sharing, but some of the hurdles you've had to overcome, and how have these tools, these strategies helped you do that?
Certainly I think that I had to overcome one of the struggles that many people do, is that the struggle of low self-esteem, where you have low self-esteem. You don't like yourself so much. And, when I reflect on how that came to be, like, what was I impacted by that left me at that place? I grew up, I was an only child. So I grew up in Southern West Virginia. My mom and dad divorced when I was probably about 5. I think my dad was probably absent most of that early 5 years when they were still married. So then I was an only child with a single mom who went to work and had to work really hard at a minimum wage job. So we struggled to make ends meet. And I think she was struggling and probably depressed when I look back on it now. So sort of absent father, totally physically absent, and then mothering that she was doing the best she could with depression, but some of that absent and not having siblings. My family was mostly matriarchal. So all of the women in the family, I came from, I think, a long line of women who had low self-esteem and, had just many struggles. And I didn't see healthy relationships because most of the women had been divorced. There were not men, or if there were men, they sort of came in and out in unhealthy ways. So I think I was set up early on to have low self-esteem by that, like, transfer through childhood. And it set me up for, I believe, unhealthy relationships. Part of what a therapist wants to do is fix things. So when you get into a relationship that with someone that's maybe not real healthy, man, I'm like a dog with a bone. I am gonna hang in there and attempt to fix that. And so my journey in learning to take better care of myself and to work on growing enough to be able to recognize that I want to surround myself with healthy relationships. And the changes that means you have to make in your life that are not always easy. They're difficult choices. And when it comes down to I choose me so that I can become the best version of me. Sometimes it means letting go of, friendships, relationships, love relationships that are unhealthy. I mean, that's just basically the bottom line.
It really is amazing how, so much of what you just shared are the principles that we often talk about that we all need to do to live our best lives. And of course, because so much of it was your influence, but to hear you talking about how, again, this isn't just theory that you teach or that you take clients through. This isn't just theory that we talk about on the podcast because, we learned it or read it in a book. It's stuff that we've done in our own lives. You've had to make those difficult choices. You've had to decide which people you want to surround yourself with. You've had to do the hard work. You've had to, even when you go back to the things you do to help yourself, you've had to put into practice certain, some rituals and some things. And it really is, I'm taking so much of that from what I'm hearing you share your story is how critical it is. This isn't just stuff we've talked about in theory. It works when we do it, and we've all done it. We're all in the journey of doing it. Yeah,
and I think a big part of that work, I know in our work together, was getting clear on what scripts are playing in the back of my brain, what beliefs have I formed around things that happened in my life. And I've spoken openly about the show that really up until just even recent years, I lived my whole life with a terrible, deep sense of self-loathing, that I wasn't worthy, that I wasn't good enough, that any good that I did came up from a good place. I've always, like you, I think I've always wanted to help people, but so much of it was maybe if I do enough good, it'll outdo the bad person that I am. And I think a lot of people struggle with their sense of self, and struggle with these scripts. What are some of the scripts that, as you're in your own personal healing journey, what are one or two sort of major scripts that you had to kind of deconstruct and replace with a healthier mindset?
Well, I mean, I think, just a general, going along with what you said, that basic, the 4 basic life positions. I'm okay. You're okay. I'm not okay. You're not okay. I just didn't feel okay. My life script was, I'm not okay. Like carrying deep sense of shame, low self-esteem, just I'm not okay. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking, I remember the exact moment, because I'd been doing this work, I went through my master's program, and then I went and worked a couple of years, and then I went back to my doctoral program. But I remember the exact moment after my master's program where I'd been using affirmations. Like I'd been, and I talked to clients about using affirmations all the time. And it was so funny. I was in with a client recently, and I asked them about the affirmations, and they're like, well, I tried it, but it really didn't work. And I said, well, how long did you work at these? And they said, well, I did it consistently for a couple of weeks. And I said, let's think about the gym. If you go to the gym and you are going to want to lose 200 pounds, would you come back after 2 weeks and say it didn't work? And so mental gym is the same as physical gym, right? It is a long-term process. And the first thing is trusting the process, trusting, like they say in AA, that we know that those who have gone before us have found a way to make the way that it works. And so trusting the process of therapy, that if I found someone who says, here's some things that work, that I hang in there with those. But I remember I was on High Street in Morgantown, West Virginia, and many times I was at the stoplight. I didn't see right where I was sitting. I'd been repeating that over and over. I'm okay. I really am okay. And every other time there was a battle, because this inner critic would come up and go, yeah, but what about that? And now, you're not completely okay because you're this and I was like, I'm okay. I'm just okay. And I was like, oh, there was silence, like that the inner critic was not there. And I'm not saying that then life doesn't test you and that inner critic can't come back up. But before, dealing with the inner critic was a wrestling match. We were in it. I was pinning them down, and we're rolling and fighting. I'm exhausted. And these days I don't hear from the inner critic much at all. Even when I do, or if I do, now it's just the silence is, the inner critic is silenced, perhaps with a shh, or a look, or a gentle pat. And, it's so that script of not okay, and, changing that script to, I really am, with all of my, I am at a point with all of my faults, with all the things I made, I'm okay. And I really, really like myself. And I don't know that I could have even said that to you. I don't know that I could have said that 10 years ago, even 7 years ago. It's been an amazing process, and it charges me up even more for being a therapist, because to be able to really feel that, not just want to feel it and not feel it some days, but to really change that script.
Yeah, that is so powerful. Sherry, it's actually quite something for, at least for me in this moment, to hear you talk about your struggles with self-worth, self-esteem, not feeling okay. And because I've only known you for a few years, and as I was describing you to Steve, our producer, earlier, that you're in for a treat this afternoon. Sherry's amazing. I said she radiates like no one else I've ever met. Radiates joy. You radiate joy. You radiate compassion. And so to hear that at one point in your life, you probably still were radiating joy, but you were leaking, right? There were many holes in your cup, which meant that you were leaking constantly. It's just a little bit surreal to hear you tell that story, because I've never heard you tell that story. And I think when you said at the top of the show, I remind myself that I'm human. Right? I'm human first, is such a powerful statement.
Well, and I'm sure that there's a lot of listeners listening to you say that, and they're kind of sitting there going, I'm not okay. Like they're still in that place of not okay. So what would you say to our listeners? We're going to start to wrap up our show today, but what would you say to those that are listening that are, maybe they're finally ready to start this journey of healing? What would you say or encourage as the first few steps to taking that journey?
Find yourself a good counselor. Find yourself. It could be a coach. It could be a counselor. It could be somebody. Connection heals. Connection heals.
Yeah.
That is isolation destroys, connection heals. So, and in this world, like they say, with all the social media, with all the, we are the most connected we've ever been. But I also see people suffering more than ever from loneliness and isolation. But if you are walking around feeling not okay, that is not a brokenness in you. That is something that happened as a result of your experiences. And it's absolutely something that can be fixed. Just like if we break our arm, it can be fixed. Feeling not okay can absolutely be fixed. And you find somebody, you need a witness. We all need a witness. We need a witness to the experience. And then we need somebody with tools who can help us. So often the witness may not even be a therapist. The witness might be, start talking to somebody. Start talking to somebody. Don't be ashamed, embarrassed, guilty about all of us have not been okay. All of us, there's not a person out there who's walked around okay 100% of the time. And so I'd say my first advice is connect. The second thing is begin telling your truth and your story. Begin telling your story. Begin telling your truth.
That's so good. I mean, that's so similar to what Jim said when he was here on the show, right? That the work begins by connecting, opening up, and starting to share your pain. I heard it said recently that we often interpret trauma, and we all have it in one way or another, as something that happened to us, when actually trauma is something that happened within us when something happened to us. In other words, we attached meaning to it. We attached probably an irrational belief around that, and then that's what we end up carrying. But so good, and I'm so looking forward to the next episode, Sherry, where we get to dive more deeply into how you help people, and some of the frameworks that you use, and because I think our listeners are just going to eat it up. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been so good, and we want to just, with our listeners as well, want to encourage you. We really have tried in all of these episodes. Our aim is to not just suggest, here, go do this, but we try to provide as many resources and tools to equip you. And one of the resources that we can certainly help, we know that we do this with our own clients, with our coaching clients, is we don't just say, hey, go find somebody to talk to. If you need help finding someone to talk to, send us an email, reach out to us. We're happy to introduce you to some people that are in our community, in our network, that we think are pretty good. We won't recommend who you should speak to, but we'll give you some suggestions for sure. Certainly, we'll have Sherry's information and contact ways that you can contact her available in the show notes, but we can make available some other people as well, because we really do want to help people take that journey together.
Absolutely. So thank you again, Sherry, for being on the show today. Thank you for our listeners for tuning in. We remind you to please visit our website, livingrichly.me, where you can find all of the episode show notes and all the links that we're going to post about Sherry and her work so that you can contact her if you'd like to. And remember to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes, especially the one that will follow this one.
Next one's going to be great. So yeah, definitely tune in for that. Thank you again for joining us. We wish you just to continue to enjoy and take your own journey to living your best life.